Hey guys, this is Alex from 9x. I hope you're doing well wherever and whenever you're watching this video. We're sharing once again a 9x live workshop with you here. The workshop was how to work with documents using AI. This time, Jan and PYV, my other co-founders, ran this workshop. They showed participants how to use AI to work more efficiently with documents, from basic use cases of data extraction to a bit more advanced workflows. They could have gone on for hours. We had to cut it short at some point. Maybe we'll do another one later this year. Until then, enjoy this workshop. And one last thing, if you could subscribe to the YouTube channel, I always forget to mention that in the videos. So if you don't want me to get into trouble, please subscribe to the channel. Cheers.
Thank you for joining this live session. So another 9x live session, this time dedicated to working with documents in AI, working with AI in documents, where basically we try to bring together the different ways that you can leverage the documents that you might already have or that you have created, also documents that you will create to enrich or add some capabilities to your document workflows. So what we've planned for today, three parts. First, we start with a quick overview of what is currently possible today with AI when it comes to working with documents. We will then look at the different techniques that you can use to interact with the documents using AI. And finally, we will focus on the two key approaches and the corresponding technical infrastructure that you can leverage when it comes to building document-based AI functionality. Let's start at a high level. What can AI do with your documents? But before we even get into that level of details, even if it's very high level, I want to clarify a couple of things, especially on what we'll cover today. First, when I say AI, what I mean for this session is either native AI chat interface, so ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, AI SaaS, which can be either SaaS application that integrated some AI features, like we will see in one of the demo, Untitled AI, or new AI-first SaaS application, the so-called AI wrapper, which are focused on specific use case, and some of them are focused around leveraging documents. We will see another one in the demo I'll do just after Jan, using Dante AI. Then we'll also consider AI workflows, which are basically automations leveraging AI capabilities through the API capabilities of the different AI providers. And then finally, knowledge bases, which are basically some native features from AI model providers that we use, and also some AI SaaS allowing user to leverage what's called file embedding. And this is something that we'll see later in the presentation. That's it for the AI part of the session. Now let's move to the document part of the title. When we say document for the purpose of this session, we'll focus on PDF, so invoice, report, study, also text documents, so any file that you generate through a word processing application. So your typical Word, Google Doc, DocX, any document generated using a text processor. And finally, presentation. So the good old consultant slide, the slide deck, the internal or external slide deck, the PowerPoint, the Google slide, or for us, the pitch. All right. So first, you need to understand the four core use cases of generative AI. Within generative AI, you can generate text, so generating a draft for a project from scratch. For example, you can summarize content from one or multiple sources, and these sources we'll see in an instance can be files. Extracting information, so extracting specific data points or pieces of information from a given source, that can be a document or several documents. And then finally, classifying. So identifying if a document is an invoice, a credit note, a signed contract, a proposal, etc. But actually, there's also a fifth use case now, which is becoming more and more common, which is actually all of the above. So performing any of these actions or functions and a chain of these actions to produce an end result. All right. Now, let's take a look at the few techniques that you can use to build AI-powered use cases with documents. In a nutshell, there's like four main techniques that you can use to build such solutions. The oldest and most universal technique can be used with almost any model, and it's called actually in-context learning. So it was a fancy term that has been, invented as, prompting starting to become something, and you had all this fancy name around prompting. In-context learning is nothing else than basically copy-pasting the whole text from the document inside your prompt. Second, which is the next evolution, and that most models now are offering, is the natural evolution of this, which is basically attaching files to a conversation in the chat interface to interact with its contents. For example, if like me, you live in a foreign country and need to fill complex administrative form in a foreign language, well, you can just upload the form to ChatGPT and prompt it to ask you all the questions necessary to fill that form. Then when it asks you the question and you answer, you can also indicate it can indicate you where to put which information, and you can even fill then the form, and then finally upload the filled version of the form to ChatGPT in the same conversation, and ask it if you did not do any mistake. That's typical use case. Now, if you want to get a bit more into interesting topics for the people which are either reviewing a lot of documents or who have a lot of workflows that depend on documents, you can basically do the same as the previous example, but you nest that inside an automated workflow. Where this becomes very powerful is because it opens some more advanced functionalities and it pushes the limits of what is feasible way further than before. Before, you could do a bit of document processing using an older technology called OCR. But now, not only can you extract information from a document, you can also check whether the document is correct, whether you are actually looking at a document that should be processed in this workflow, and so on and so forth. And one also of the typical good use cases, in previous steps, when we were only automation experts, we didn't have AI yet, there was a lot of cases where you needed some what's called eyeballing or human step. Where now there's a lot of these small steps that were just very, very quick, very simple, where you just had it to check something. Is this the right document? Am I looking at an invoice or a receipt? The difference might be very small, but actually for a German company, you cannot book a receipt into your accounting, you only can book an invoice. So you need to have a document where the word invoice is written on it, or rational, or the corresponding in the language. Well, that was very difficult to identify beforehand, or you needed OCR, but if you had OCR, then you need to look at in which language is the document. Well, now you can actually put some prompts and ask in a step to a document processing AI step to actually identify whether this is a valid invoice that you can actually ingest into your bookkeeping process or not. And then the last option, which is slightly different in nature, and we'll see that later actually when we look at the different, the two different ways of handling technically document within AI, is the knowledge. So you can use a document as the knowledge source for either an AI chatbot or an agent. For a chatbot, for example, you will have the bot provide answer solely based on the documents and not its pretend content. For an agent, you will have the agent use the document either as knowledge to perform some task or as a context for the task he has to perform, or you can also use it as an example, as a template. So it allows you to achieve a goal, and we'll see that later in an example. You can even have the agent achieve a goal without expliciting the logic. You just say, this is a few examples of what I want to achieve. These are information that you can do, actions that you can take. I want you to produce something which is similar in meaning, in logic, and in consistency. And we'll see one of the examples at the end of the session. But enough now for slides. Let's do a first demo. Yeah, shall we? Let's have a look at a simple example of AI fields in the no-code database network.
Yes, let's do it. Maybe before I share my screen, just a quick question on that one. So how many people, and you can use either the chat or use the react button, put some thumbs up. So how many people have already, let's say, uploaded a file to ChatGPT, to Claude, to Gemini? How many people have used like the upload a file functionality already in their LLM of choice? Let me see. Yep, Alan has, very good. Is the react button actually available to people? If it's not, let me know. Yes, some thumbs up. Very good. Awesome. And now how many of you, and now again, use the react or use the chat, have found yourself basically taking the same file or same type of file, whether that's like an invoice or a contract, very often, and basically uploaded the same file to ChatGPT, and again, like copy pasted an old prompt. You have one prompt ready that okay, extract some data for an invoice or extract some data from a contract. How many people seem to be doing this on a repetitive basis? Also, let me know with some reactions. Yeah, Avishai. All right, so what I want to show you now is basically a different method, and this is sort of in this AI SaaS category. So let me just share my screen and desktop one. And PYV, you can see this.
Yes, now I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So everyone, this is Airtable. Right now I'm in an Airtable interface. And what I want to do is quickly show you just a very simple app that we've built for this demonstration, but then we're going to go under the hood and take a look. So actually what this one does is it allows us to upload reports. So these could be like industry reports, marketing reports, and then we can get some facts from them. So I'm actually going to upload a report that we've already run some analysis on, but I'm going to upload it again. So I'm just going to drop in a file here from my desktop. So this is the Airtable Marketing Trends Report of 2024. And what's cool is the way that we've built this little Airtable app, we've actually made it dynamic. So sorry that it always takes a little bit longer when we're screen sharing to do these sort of things. Just have to bear with me.
24 megabytes, that's quite the file here you have.
It's a juicy one. It's a juicy one. It's very visual heavy. It has some nice graphics and a lot of content. So let's have a look. And we're almost there. All right, so my file's been attached. And now what I can do, the way that this little app has been set up, is I can choose like what type of facts do I want to extract. And we ran this previously and I already checked out like the highlights, the important statistics. But here I just want to simply know what quotes are basically mentioned in this document. So I can hit extract. This is now going to, in a second, create the record. So there we see our new record's been created. And we see here that there's a new AI value available. I'm just going to hit generate with AI. Now AI is going to do its thing. One important thing to note, which you'll see under the hood in a second, that this is actually something that can be automated as well. So we could change our settings to say, hey, whenever there is a new record here, just run the AI analysis immediately. Now this does, okay, and here we go. So here we have, for this document, here are the quotes extracted from the document. Marketing leaders are struggling to demonstrate true impact. So we have all of the quotes listed here. And this is just a very simple use case for us, as we really would use this typically for maybe doing some brainstorming around like social media content or blog articles, seeing different reports that have been shared, and then checking what type of information is contained. And so where this gets exciting is I'm going to head now over to Airtable into actually the building section. And this is a super simple base setup. So here we just have a title. We have that file, which is an attachment field. And here's where I'm adding my PDFs. And then what we have is we have a multi-select field where I can actually choose the type of information that I want to extract. And then lastly, and this is new, this is a feature called Airtable AI. Now it is an add-on that you need to pay extra for. It's like a credit-based system. But in my opinion, it is probably one of the like quickest and best ways to experiment with AI when you want to do something like repetitively. So here, if I go and check, all we have is here a simple prompt. And what we can basically do is dynamically put in other fields. So here you're saying, hey, here is a document I want you to analyze. We're following sort of prompting best practices, giving sort of ChatGPT a role, or giving the AI a role of what it needs to do. I'm saying, hey, here's going to be a document attached in the file field. And then what I want you to extract, we're basically dynamically passing the facts to extract. So that's the whatever single select is added here. And it's basically doing it. And now if I have a look, it's basically, I'm saying generate values with AI. We can go into these settings here, and we even have the possibility to choose from the different models. And we have this toggle to say, hey, do I want to generate this automatically? If I toggle this on, one important thing to know though, this will consume probably more credits. And for instance, now if I would just like make a change here to say, hey, this, I want to know the quotes and the experts mentioned. That means that, see how I've made a change to the conditions, which means now this automatically runs and AI is regenerating, let's say, its analysis. And if I head over to that interface, you'll see that's what's happening right now. And we can wait and take a look at that one. And here we see now we have quotes and we also have experts. So here it says no specific experts are mentioned by name in the document. The report appears to be an Airtable Marketing Trends Report for 2024. So what I really want to show with this demonstration is when you find yourself getting in the habit of the same document over and over in ChatGPT, always using the same prompt, what's amazing in a solution like this is you only need to write the prompt once. Here, you're just writing the prompt once. You can then share this app to people in your team to others. So it's like you're basically taking that that repetitiveness away, and you can know all I need to do is simply drop the next file, whether that's invoices, contracts, whatever it needs to be. You're basically saving yourself a lot of time because you can have this sort of AI custom built solution. So before I throw it back over to you, people, were there any questions that came up in the chat, or does anyone have a question now?
We have a couple of questions. Tilan was asking, is this mainly using Untitled AI? So basically, he was just wondering why we would just use Untitled AI and not just make an API call to any LLM to do the same thing. I guess it's simplicity or any other.
Yeah, like it's really for like depending on the level that you're at, right? So with this, it is important to know that Airtable, it is like a credit-based system. So if you're like trying to optimize this purely for like the most cost-efficient approach, yes, it probably makes sense to do an API call and have AI run this. But I think for people just getting out into like moving away from always interacting one-on-one with ChatGPT to start like building out these systems, this is a great way for experimenting quickly, because you can see here like the technical setup is so simple. I'm literally just adding a field here and saying, I want this to be an AI generated field. And then to improve the results, the only thing you need to change is your prompt. It's not a technical situation anymore. It's like, do I have the technical expertise to do this? It's purely iterating on the prompt. And if you're not getting the results you want, it's basically making some updates to this one using tools like Claude's prompt generator. But it just makes it super easy for people like just getting started with moving away from one-on-one interactions with ChatGPT to needing to like on a more scalable way interact with the same document, or like let's say the same type of document many times.
Yeah, I fully agree. Someone is asking also, like, is it, do you know if Untitled AI is, if you can use it with the free Airtable subscription? I don't think it's, I think it's the case.
I don't believe so, no. But I think when you're doing your next demo, I can quickly take a look at the pricing and share some links in the chat. Yeah, I think you need to have it like a paid plan, and then it's like an add-on on top of that.
Yeah. We have another question, which is with subjective information to extract, for example, important statistics, what has been your experience in how well it picks out the right statistic, aka how it defines importance, or in your example, is this clearly defined in the source document?
So what I would say here is like in this is a very simple scenario, I would say. And don't let, just the question there is like, don't let AI decide what are important statistics, is give it examples, right? It's like here, if we were building this out further, what we have in this prompt, it's purely just dynamically going to list here, if the case was important statistics, that's literally all it would say, right? But you can make this a little bit more complex, saying if the type of, here in the extraction instructions, so then you can have like, if the extractions contain important statistics, that's not the easiest thing to say, then go and do this, right? And give examples. Important statistics are the ones in the first 3 pages. They're the ones mentioned many times, like whatever for you would highlight as important statistics. See if you can basically like formulate that into a prompt. But again, here it's really like iteration is the best. What I would say is start first with your simplest prompt as possible, and then build on top of it. If you see it's not doing a good job, or actually you only want it to always have just 3 important statistics, tell it that, right? But it's something that you should iterate on in the prompt.
I agree, and eventually the good thing is like the value I would say Airtable AI provides here is just that just wrapped around the different models that you can use, and you will have exactly the same results as you will have from the models. So your output is just going to be as good as the model you use, and your ability to prompt the model the right way. But I just made it easier for you to just attach the file, and you don't have to make this any technical setup.
No, and you think like this is spoiling potentially a little bit later on, but you might notice here there are some models that actually don't, for instance, allow you via API to process PDFs. So it looks like Airtable is actually doing this first. I think it gets a little bit technical now, but what I wouldn't be surprised is what they're actually doing is first having some sort of software that is extracting the data out of the file and then giving that to the large language model. But I don't want to spoil it too much what we have in store. But you might see also that even here in Airtable AI, you get access to extra capabilities than you might normally have if you're trying to make an API call directly to the large language model.
Exactly, and I think it comes back to what we mentioned earlier with the in-context learning. Eventually, you can if you are able to extract the text data from a document, then you can use any model, provided that your context window is big enough with that data. We have another question here from Alex Crosby. Is it possible to extract the data from the document in a structured format, for example, a sheet? So I would say here the secret is just to make sure that you in your prompt you make sure to specify the format that you want. And I would say in this case you have two options. Like you have the expensive option, which is you just build one field for every single information, but that's just wasting AI credits. I would say the proper way is just to adjust your prompt, especially specify a format, and you're gonna have the LLM return the output in a specific format. So a JSON, an XML, could be a comma separated. So just make sure that you have basically the response that is going to be a text, but you can have the LLM output the response in a format that you define. And then you can use formulas in a table, or you can use other ways to just basically split that information into different parts. What you can't have right now is you can't create a table, or you can't have you can have it just creating a table automatically. You would need to just first have a text, and then somehow using formula parse that text, which can be a structured JSON, into different columns.
Yeah, we're getting some juicy questions early. It's very nice.
Yeah.
Minds are rolling.
Except for Claude PDF Reader, I have repeatedly had issues with file uploads where details get lost. What experiences have you had regarding this, especially concerning paper knowledge? Interesting. I see that Tilan has been responding to that. I think for us, we haven't paid a lot with like extended super long like paper knowledge. I think what we tend to do, to be honest, whenever we build a lot of AI things these days, we tend to use Claude a lot. And I have to say that whenever we use AI, there's going to be also a main reason why, and Jan is going to present that a bit later. But we tend to always, I think right now, especially given the limited difference in prices, or if you don't use it at massive scale, if you can afford to, we would recommend to, as much as you can, use the smartest model, because if you can, you are going to save a lot of time trying to come up for the limitation of the model. Just use the strongest model you can afford. All right.
Should we another question, or should we move on to the next demo?
Let's move to the next demo, and yeah, let's move to the next demo. I'm going to share my screen. Share this to. All right. So the next demo is also going to be very simple. It's just to give an idea of what's also possible. And it's going to be basically quickly building a chatbot based on a document. So we're going to use for this Dante AI. We have no affiliation with them whatsoever. It's just that I think it's one of the cheapest and simplest solutions out there to just build a quick chatbot on a document. And that is typically an example of what we mentioned earlier as the SaaS wrapper. It is a SaaS that just takes some functionalities from LLMs, and that allows you to build some very simple use case. In some cases, I think if you are good at building your document, you're going to have actually something relatively advanced. But for us, we're just going to use something like very basic. The only reason why I show this is because you will see it is a solution that you can have publicly shareable, you can embed on your website. So that's why it's interesting. All right. So we have this, for example, we have this document, which is our course catalog that contains basically every single course module we have and the content of this course. This is a document that we use and we share when we have potential people interested. We have companies that come to us and want us to design a custom program for them. So what I want to do is I want to use Dante AI to just create a course catalog chatbot. And you'll see it's super simple. So I come here, I say, okay, 9x course catalog. I put demo here so I can figure it out. Then the next step is just, okay, upload some knowledge files. I'm going to upload the file. Yes, here, download workshop course catalog. Then I can define the personality, so I can go with something custom. I can put some information, but to start with, let's try to be a bit optimistic here. Here I can define the rigidity, so to how much do I want the similar responses for the same questions, or do I want the chatbot to potentially answer differently to the same question? So it's just a question of how much creativity do you want to put in the chatbot. So at the beginning, I would recommend to be very rigid. You would rather want to make sure that you are to the point. And then if you see there's repetition, and depending on your use case, if you need the chatbot to be a bit more creative in the way that it's gonna be answering, well, you might adjust that. Here, very important, allow access to internet. So basically, what this kind of SaaS is doing is you have two options. You can say, I'm gonna use the current knowledge of an LLM and try to answer questions using the document you provide me as knowledge, meaning that's the main source, but I can also use other information. Or you can do what I'm doing right now, which is the main use case, or one of the most the most representative example of this kind of use case, which is no. The concept is this is a wrapper that basically takes the document, provide it, and we see it's going to embed it and create it and provide it as a vector database. And we see later what this means. But basically, it takes the document, it uses the reasoning capability of the LLM, its ability to process natural language and understand what it means. And it will force it to only regurgitate the content from my document and answer questions based on that content. And if I click on next here, I just have an overview, and then I just need to hit train. And then basically what's happening here is something that we'll see a bit later, which is called embedding. It takes a bit of time because the document that we have is being processed so that every time that we ask a question to the chatbot, it's able to answer fast. Now, for the sake of this demo, I had already created another one. What you can see is you can generate then a URL that you can use like this, but you can also embed it on your website. So you could easily start thinking, hey, I'm going to use, I'm going to have all my, product documentation. I'm going to put this on my, product website, on my product page. I would have the sales information. I can put that also on another page. Depending on which product page I have, I can put different documentation, or I can even build internal solutions. And then if I say, hey, can you tell me about the next courses? And basically, it's going to retrieve me information about what are the different topics, what are the different courses, what is the learning approach. And then I can start also discussing with them, tell me more about generative AI. And it's going to go search the documents, post content, understanding what generative AI and its importance, exploring the first use case for generative AI, learning about LLMs, writing, learning format, includes video, lessons, slide text. And if we go here into generative AI, well, this is basically exactly what we have in the document, just summarize and provide it. And the good thing is I can cross different information from the documents. And I have something which very, very quickly could be spun off. Like it took me 2 minutes. Obviously, you will find some limitations. And then the name of the game is basically to take whichever solution you have here, add some additional instructions, make sure you put the right model to it, and then optimize for cost, for quality of the answers. You might tweak a bit your documents. For example, my document here doesn't contain anything about the company. So what you can do is you could add another type of knowledge. If I come back here to the document, I can edit my chatbot, and you will see in the knowledge what's very common is that when you add content, you can add a file or a URL. So I can provide it with a specific URL, my homepage URL. I can give the entire domain, so my whole website. No, I need to make sure that this is coherent and the information there is up to date. But I can basically get this SaaS to go and scrape the information from my website, transform it actually into a document, and then embed it into the knowledge, and then use that also as a source for answering to my specific questions. And that's pretty much it for this presentation. I just wanted it to be very quick, just to see that, without any coding, just with, I think this costs like $8 per month. Obviously, if you want to put branding and stuff, you might fall into different pricing brackets, but there are capabilities that you can use. And especially if it doesn't have to be customer facing, but you want something to make some internal documentation easily accessible in your organization, where there's way to test and to see whether that's a good user interface that can bring efficiency inside your organization.
Nice. And we have a couple of questions, Piv. So firstly from Alexander, why did you choose Dante over Cody, VoiceFlow, Chatbase, etc.? I guess there's always what we're seeing in all of these categories. There's never just one player coming. There's always 4, 5, or 6.
Yes. To be honest, I can't provide a valuable answer here. At the time, Dante, the first time I started playing with Dante was almost like 9 months ago. At that time, there were not a lot of players. I think recently I've seen that chat-based seems to be a bit more, bit more interesting. To be honest, I think what I can say is, when I look at these, we need to look at what integration they have. So Dante was good because it was cheap and it was just based on document. And now they're starting to add some new things. A lot of them will have Notion as a knowledge base. So if you have all of your documentation in Notion, you might want to use a platform that has already integration with Notion. Some of them might have some integration more with like ticketing system or more with like Confluence is one of them. So depending on which source you have, you might pick the solution that is fitting the source you want. They also have the different SaaS will have different point of view. So some will be optimized for customer success chatbots, some for sales chatbots. So in the case of Dante, they also offer, for example, the human takeover. So they have functionality to just give that over to a human that will do the chat. So it kind of goes into the support use case or the sales use case. And I would choose always based on the use case, the source and integration available, and how much time do you need to get it, and obviously, the pricing scheme.
Perfect. And I think that answered the next question Caroline also had around, can you add proprietary content from Notion? And that will depend depending on which basically
it depends on the platforms. But Notion is one of the most, if not the most implemented, but one of the most, because the beginning of this kind of knowledge-based application was actually chatbots. Notion came relatively early. Ability to scrape a URL is even before, because sometimes you don't even have a Notion, you just have a knowledge base on your website, and you just have your FAQ page, and that's what you would provide. But Notion is a common one.
Perfect. All right. I think we're good. Let's move on.
Yes. Details also don't get. Sorry, details from source document get lost when I bring them into AI using traditional methods. No software. Is one method better than another among these methods? I think that's a good segue to the next. Exactly. We will address that right away. All right. So I'm going to close the question. Jan, I'll let you take over the chat. All right. So basically, there are two main approaches. And now bear with me for the one of you which are like entry level. I try to keep this simple, or it's time to go grab a coffee if you are not afraid of not sleeping tonight, because this is the one step which is a bit technical for tonight. Basically, the first part and the first way you can provide a document to an LLM is what we've seen so far in a few examples, is file upload. What it is directly uploading files like PDFs, docx, or CSV into an AI chat interface to interact with the contents. You can also do that if you want through the API, but that's technically the same concept. It's the best for quick interactive use cases, like summarizing, asking questions, or extracting information without coding. The purpose of this is basically immediate use. So there's no pre-processing required. You can upload the file and start interacting with it right away. You have a lot of flexibility because it's great for temporary one-time queries. You can put the document, ask questions, and as long as you're in the conversation, the document remains. But if you just go away, then you will lose that document, or you will lose that as a context. It supports a variety of files. Many AI models upload a lot of PDFs, Word documents. Some of them also allow you to put spreadsheet and images. But as we said, we're focusing on PDF, Word document, and styles for this session. And the good part is also it can be interactive and dynamic, because you can directly ask the AI questions and receive real-time insights based on the uploaded content. Now, the limitation of this approach is one, limited memory. When the session ends, the uploaded file is no longer accessible. No, the good thing is now in ChatGPT or Claude, or even Gemini, you have the ability to come back to a previous chat interaction. So these, as the model gets better and the native chat client is improving, you don't have that problem too much. The second limitation is it's session specific. So the AI models do not retain knowledge from uploaded files for future interactions. So if you start a new conversation, the file that was uploaded is lost. And the third, which is the biggest of all the limits, is token and processing limits. When you do this, the last document may hit the token of the file, like the context window, the token of the file size limitation. So you will see, we'll see later, we have tried to come up with an overview of these, but basically you have 5 size limitation when you upload this document. You have the content of the file will be applied to the context window of the model you're using. So if you have a too big of a file, well, in most cases you can't do that, or you need to use, for example, Gemini, which has a massive context window, but which is not as performant on specific actions as some others, like for example, Claude 3.5. So this will be the main limitation. And this is also why, in some cases, you might have to use file embedding. File embedding is radically, from a technical point of view, is radically different. What it is basically transforming document content into vector embeddings to enable semantic search and querying. A vector embedding, it's basically, it's a bit complex to explain. I'm not sure I fully understand what it is, but basically, you take any document is composed by a token, and basically each of the token can be embedded, which is it can be transformed into a vector, which is the mathematical representation of the semantic meaning of that token within basically a multiple scale space. So basically, a vector database is just storing pieces of words, pieces of information, not based on the keywords, not based on the letters, but based on the meaning they have. And the reason why this is extremely powerful is because afterwards, once you query it, well, you don't look for keywords, you look for meaning position. It's like basically you have a multidimensional way of representing the semantic meaning of things. And then basically your model is able to search for semantic proximity. So you ask a question, it looks inside all of the tokens you have from the document, or the element extracted from the document. What are the ones which are the closest? And that's why this is extremely faster than going through the whole document and then answering. So how it works is the file content is processed using embedding models. Then the embeddings are stored in the vector database, but all happen in the background, you don't see it. And then the queries are matched with document content using what's the name of this is similarity search, which is basically looking for things which have the same meaning or the closest meaning. This is based for scalable, efficient querying of large data sets of knowledge base. Now, obviously, there's a massive limitation, which is it takes time to do the embedding. So if you look at what the pros are, the files remain stored and accessible over multiple interactions. So you can have different conversations with a model which has been attached to a database. So in the OpenAI world, it becomes the custom GPT or the assistant. And whichever session you have or whichever conversation you have, the document is always available as knowledge for the LLM. It supports large-scale knowledge retrieval because basically you can add as many files, not as many files, but you can add a lot of files, and especially because the file itself doesn't count towards the context limit, the token limit, the context window anymore. Now, to be extremely precise, when you ask a question to the model is going to go and perform the search. The result of the search will be injected into your prompt, and that will count towards the limits. So if you have massive documents all talking about the same concept, and you ask a question about that concept, there's a risk of hitting the limit, the context window limits, but it's pretty rare. What you can do with this, that you can't if you want to upload a file in attached to the conversation, is you can gather information from a large number of files within one prompt. So you can ask a question, and that question will be answered, accessing potentially 25 documents that can be super large, and it will all happen at the same time, and it's very fast because the processing of the meaning of the document has already been done during what's called the embedding phase. Now, on the back side of things, first, there's no immediate interaction because unlike in file upload, embedding typically requires pre-processing. That's what we saw when I was creating the chatbot. It was just loading. So obviously for one-page PDF, it goes relatively fast, but otherwise that's something that can take a lot of time. Secondly, potential cost. It is way more expensive to embed a file than to just put it in the chat and chat with it. Like it's embedding has cost, and actually in the pricing schemes of most of the providers, we see that you pay per embedded document, so per gigabytes of embedded documents, on a monthly basis. So you don't pay just when you use token interacting with it. You actually also pay just for having that vector database, which has been done and integrated for you by the provider. And that's basically the main drawbacks of this.
And I think
these are the two options and the two limits. Yes.
On that one, I think as well important to point out is what's interesting is basically like the drawbacks of one in a certain use case could actually be its benefits, right? And if I'd have to simplify, like with file upload, one of the drawbacks is that it's a little bit technical, as Piv mentioned, that like every new chat, it basically doesn't remember the last file that was uploaded, right? And so, but actually that could be a benefit, because in our case of when we want AI to extract some information out of a industry report, I don't want it when it's extra finding like, what are the top 3 facts from this industry report? I don't want it to be confused about the last 10 industry reports we asked it on, right? And so the way I would sort of separate when you're picking these 2 use cases, if you have a situation where you have a set of knowledge and you might potentially need to ask many different types of questions on that single set of knowledge, you'd probably go for file embedding, because you don't know, like you're gonna have many different prompts asked to the same data set. Now, if actually you have always the same question asked to many different files, you'd want to go with file upload. So for instance, if you say, hey, every time I add an invoice, I want to extract these 5 things, file upload is much better, because you don't actually need to add all 100 invoices in an embedding method. So really finding out what do you want to do with it? Is it more this like knowledge base that you want to ask maybe multiple different questions against? Versus is it, hey, I know exactly what I want and I just want to do it many times from different documents? That's sort of a good way to pick between the 2 models.
Do you have some questions on this already, Jan, on that?
Just some minds were blown, I think, is one way better than the other in terms of getting specific details correct. E.g., will embedding forget miss source details? I think, Matt, it's really like comes back to that what I just mentioned. When you say specific details, if you want, for instance, the scenario that like, hey, I want to extract 5 things from invoices and I'm getting new invoices every week from different providers, file upload is going to be much better. If you say, hey, like, here's my whole Notion space and I want to ask questions against it, then file embedding would be the way to go. I know it's an oversimplification, but I'd really separate it into those 2. Is it like one knowledge base and you don't know what questions are going to be asked, versus you know what questions you're going to be asked, but you have many different types of the document?
Yeah. I would say, in a lot of cases, if you're looking for a detail, like the best solution remains prompt engineering. If you know that the detail is getting missed, you ask, basically, you make sure in your system prompts that actually the agent or in the instructions that, please pay attention to these details. Now, I think one good way also of looking at this is one of the other names that you will often see for file embedding, because file embedding is actually the process of taking the file and transforming it into vector database or vectors. The other name that you see more often in chatbot or in agents is knowledge base. And I think, if what you have is used not for transactional interaction, but has to be a layer of knowledge that is always present and always needed, that's when I would go for embedding. And I think we have also, I saw another question in the chat regarding, whenever you want knowledge to be dynamic, I think that's also one of the limitations that we need to be aware of. Whenever you want to add something to your knowledge base, you need to re-embed. So if you add something if you want to add a new article, a new document to your knowledge base, then there's going to be also, you will need to reprocess everything, which is a limitation. It means you can't just put a document in there and right away get an answer. So if you need that to be dynamic, you need to plan for the re-embedding. That costs money, and that will happen, maybe every night or every week. But that is something that you need to take part of the process. So this is why, while these are 2 ways to interact with documents, they are used for radically different use cases. All right. So now, if we take a look at these 2 parts, we wanted also to take a quick overview of what are the possibilities or what's currently offered by the different models, because it is a bit tricky and we can easily get lost for this. So first, on file upload capabilities benchmark, there's a couple of points that we look at. First, is it possible to attach a file in the UI? So it's the case for Claude. It's the case for ChatGPT, but only on the paid account. You can actually do it in the free plan, but you have only 3 files per day. And on Gemini, you can only do it with Gemini Advanced. The second part, which is often underlooked, but which has a very significant impact. I mean, especially I think where we touched on this, the question earlier in the chat. Only Claude on the free plan and Gemini in the advanced plan. ChatGPT has this capability, but only on enterprise plan, which I don't even want to know how much it costs. Only these models will have the ability to analyze, understand, and process the visual elements inside the PDFs. So Claude out of the box now will, if you provide it a PDF with some graphs, it will read the graphs, it will look at the image of the graph, and even if that graph or some information is not encoded as text but as an image, it will be able to understand what it means and process that as part of the information contained inside the document. It's not the case for GPT-4o. I mean, it's the case if you're on the enterprise plan, but I guess none of us here is. And on Gemini Advanced has the ability as well. Attaching the file in the API is another difference. It is not possible for ChatGPT for now and OpenAI. It is possible with the Claude, the Anthropic API, and it's only possible with the Gemini Advanced API. Then you have different file size limits. So obviously Gemini is not surprising, has super large file. It's not surprising because actually Gemini is also as a default model, only coming to text as one of the largest content window. Even the Gemini, even the smallest model, the free model, will have a super, I think it's 2 million tokens. So the token window for Gemini by default is way larger than for the others. ChatGPT, all files uploaded to a GPT or ChatGPT conversation have a hard limit of 512 megabytes per file, and Claude has a smaller limit, 30 megabytes per file, up to 25 per session. And finally, all of these offer some integrations, meaning you don't have to download the file and upload the file in the chat conversation. You can also use integrations. Gemini, obviously, with Google Drive, ChatGPT with Google Drive and OneDrive. Might be the only player in the game that will have a Microsoft integration, but for the right reason, I guess. And then Claude has integration with Google Drive. So that's pretty much it for this part. And let's maybe do a little demo on this specific case of file upload capabilities. Maybe I think through the API.
Yes, Piv, you're 100% correct, through the APIs. I'm just going to share my screen in a second. I've moved you over here. Desktop 1. Awesome. Let me know when you can see that, Piv.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So as Piv just mentioned, like Claude, which is a model by Anthropic. So for any of you, like let's say hardcore ChatGPT users, there is another very powerful model which is created by a company called Anthropic, which is known as Claude. And they have some very, very good PDF capabilities. As Piv mentioned, is one, they can understand visual elements inside PDFs, but also they're the only ones with like an out-of-the-box that via API, you can basically attach a file to a prompt. And the team at Make have made this very easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you like a quick demo of this whole flow, and then we'll show you exactly how it works. What I basically have is a simple Google Drive folder for invoices. So what I can do is I can upload, like add an invoice here. You could also have another automation that does this automatically. But what I want is basically I'm going to have Claude process the invoice and extract some information and save that to a Google Sheet. So we want to know like who's the sender, what's their address, invoice number, due date, the total amount, the currency, and then even having a link back to that invoice. So let me go and test this one out. I'm just going to here add a new invoice. And that's this one here. This is actually our last Anthropic invoice that I'm uploading. So this one's uploaded and we can take a look, and that's the invoice there. So we see it's for 18 euros. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this scenario. And so what this one is doing is it's looking for files in that folder. It's then going to download the file using basically a download a file step in Make. And now I'm passing that to Anthropic. So this does take a little bit longer time than just a simple chat completion. And so if we have a look, first of all, on the response that we're getting from the AI. So here it's giving us an outline of its extraction process, basically identifying the individual steps. And then what I've asked it to do, and we'll take a look at the prompt in a second, is to give me what's known as a JSON format, which is basically this one with those key elements in between these invoice analysis tags. So that's one, like, let's say, thing that you need to learn when you start using AI in automations, is that what the AI will always spit out is like one long text response. But we can basically instruct it to use certain formats, which then in the other steps of our automation, we can extract. So first, what I'm doing is there's basically a way that I can extract everything that's between these two invoice analysis tags. And that happens with this little text parser thing here in Make. And now you see I'm only getting the JSON file. And then in the next step, I'm asking it to pass the JSON. And what it then means is instead of having it being like one long text, I now have each of those elements as individual variables. And then what that allows me to do is basically add that to a new row in the Google Sheet where I can map each of those elements. So if we take a look at our Google Sheet and we see it successfully basically processed that invoice and nailed it 100%. So this is an example of a file upload. We didn't embed it to memory. We're not like storing it anywhere that the AI can always access it. And the way we do that here in this Claude completion step is I'm just simply picking my model and then I send a message. So a message is like a prompt. And what we can do is let me actually go and create a new message so you can see how this is set up. So if I go and add a new message, I want it to be from the user because I'm the one basically asking it to do something. And now I can say a message type and I can say text, but I can also say image, PDF, or tool result. And I'm using PDF. And then basically Make is smart enough for that when you select PDF, you can just map it to that previous Google Drive step where you download this document. And then I'm giving it a prompt. And the prompt is just saying, hey, based on this PDF, go and extract these points and then format it as a JSON. So very simple way. If you find yourself always doing, again, the same thing with a certain type of document, really try building one of these AI automation flows, and you can leverage your documents this way as well. Any questions in the chat on that one, Piv?
No, I think people are afraid that we're going to hit the 1 hour mark. But since I was 5 minutes late, we'll go one more. We'll go 5 more minutes. Quick question regarding Anthropic API. How do you normally write the system rule?
Yeah, so the system role is an interesting one, and I actually have a video on this one on YouTube, so I can maybe find that while Piv's doing the next demo. It's for ChatGPT, but it's the same for Claude as well. Typically, this is the one where I would say if I always want it to reply in a certain like format. So in here, I didn't use it. I basically put everything in the user prompt, but you could, for instance, use the system role to say, hey, like, always output a JSON in this format. And basically the system has priority over what gets sent in the user message. So typically I'm using the system, or in ChatGPT, it's now called the developer role, to say things about like tone. If I always want it to respond in a certain way, basically you have to think about this as everything that should be, if we basically would carry out this conversation and have a combination of like user and assistant messages, like back and forths, the system role is like, what are the overarching rules that can never be broken? So this is, you might say like something around the type of language it should use and the format. I'm typically putting that in the system role.
We have a question, Jan. Any idea if the Claude module can also unlock a PDF file with a password?
No, like I think you need to do that in a separate step.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
This needs to be that here, for instance, if like, let's say the way this works, like let's say password protection, this is in Google Drive. If I upload a PDF, I can obviously control who has access to it. Now I know there are some like PDFs that are inbuilt. I haven't actually come across them. I don't know if it's a Microsoft thing, but the way it works in Make is like you upload a PDF to a certain Google Drive, and Make is taking care of like, what is my connection? Do I have authorization to access that Google Drive folder? But no, you'll need to do that in another step.
There's a question also. There's a question: if you use several documents from the same type but with different formats, different spells, do you have to do several prompts? And I think that's that's one of the examples where, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Jan, but that's where using an LLM that can leverage attached documents becomes a bit stronger than OCR was. Now, obviously, OCR is going to inject the other way. They're going to inject AI into their way of processing. But that's the good thing is, as long as you provide, like, you don't say where to find information. What you say is basically the LLM is reading the document and understanding what is the invoice number. And maybe, if you need to, but first of all, it can speak most languages. So in most cases, it will be able, even if you prompt it in English, to find the number or something else. But you don't need to have a different prompt. You can actually say that you are prompting with something specific, and it will provide something else.
Exactly. And again, it's like comes down to prompting, right? Because you can see here, for instance, it says like invoice NO. We also have like a customer number. We have like an invoice period. Even the date here is written in German. And if I go and have a look at the document, I've zoomed in a little bit too much. Let me go and have a look at the Claude one. So here we have invoice number written as a full word, right? So technically speaking, we have, and it's in a totally different position. The invoice number here is on a totally different area of the page as the other sample one. But it basically understands that context. Now, again, this is something that I would reiterate is like, don't just build this and test it on one type of document. You need to test it on several. And again, remember that LLMs, these AIs are people pleasers. If you ask it to try and find the invoice number or say like, always output the invoice number, even if it sees a document where an invoice number isn't there, it will probably try and make something up. So that's where you need to rather adjust your prompt and say like, only base it if the information is there. Another tactic there, depending on how many bits of information that you want to get out, is you could also ask it to give your confidence. Like, how confident are you that you're able to find this specific piece of information? And then basically if it says like, oh, look, I was only 30% confident that this was the invoice number, you could basically put that and have a human check it, right? Whereas if it says, hey, I'm 90% confident based on the instructions, then we can just go and do the full automated flow. So this is something that you need to work on in prompts, but be careful of saying things like, always do this, always give me an invoice number, because what happens if a document comes in that doesn't have an invoice number? You also need to instruct it for, like, let's say some edge cases, not always the happy flow.
There's a question from Eric, kind of an overarching question. Is there any reason to use a dedicated tool like dogparser.io where I have to create parsing patterns, or is this a process the future? Like, to be honest, like we are going to speak more from conviction than knowledge right here, but I personally believe that this is going to be the future. That it's going to be two parts. Either the dogparser.io or, like, you know, the OCR document generation will add a layer on top of what they're doing to have AI correct what they're doing, and maybe they will do it in a more efficient way because they're focused on their use cases. So maybe they will become better at it. But then I think along the way, LLM will be involved in any document parsing whatsoever. Whether we do it with whether the model is so powerful that it can do it at a cheaper cost and without even you needing to train it, it's possible because they are getting that good. There's going to be an issue on cost, but right now the cost of the token are kind of subsidized by the models. They are dropping the cost every single release just to make sure people to drive adoption. There's another potential limitation that will be speed. Because obviously running an LLM is always going to be longer than doing a programmatic execution, because the LLM inherently takes time to think. And especially if you have a large prompt, it's not, you know, because it has all this knowledge and it can't just erase it. It's just you prompt it into not using it. And that will always be by design slower than just something that is just good at taking the PDF and extracting the document. But I do think the future of document processing is going to be AI.
100%. We have a couple more questions. So do AI models? And we have before that, do AI models read some docs better than others? Word doc is easier to read than PDF or just plain text file, for instance?
Well, I think so. I think I'm not sure if it really. So I think I would say yes, text file will always be better because actually a PDF is not always a text encoded. Sometimes the PDF is basically it's a PDF encoding of the image representation of the text. So based on the way your PDF is built, yes, text is the natural language of the LLM, so text will always be faster to process. Now, the new models that we see with Claude and Gemini to some extent, they're also able to process images within the text, so they will also become good at processing the PDF whatsoever. And maybe if the image inside the document is providing meaning, then, you know, in that case, that's going to be better to use that. And so it will depend on the nature of the document.
And I think exactly on that as well, I'd think of the use case of, like, let's say the automation platform that you're working with. So in the case of this, actually with Claude, you can only actually attach a PDF. You can't attach a doc file or a .txt. But there, what you could do in Make, you could actually have another step that actually says from the text file or from the document, just get all of it as text. And then you're pretty much just putting it into the prompt in general, right? I'm not actually saying like, hey, here's this document attached. I'd have an area of my prompt saying, read this text, and then you go and do it. And there it's probably faster than even attaching a document in the first place, right? If you already have it as text, just give the LLM the text within the prompt. But it's really powerful, this PDF processing, that it understands also where things are placed, like that headers are larger than others and that like there's different columns and it understands all that context. I definitely wouldn't underestimate the power of this like PDF analysis.
Yeah.
Just to get onto
And-
focus point on GDPR. So in terms of LLM, so I know there's Mistral based in Europe. We haven't like it is quite an enterprise solution, and I think it also involves some setup. So Mistral is based in Europe, which is GDPR friendly. I know they also have like a self-hosting. I don't think they have as many like capabilities, for instance, as the US cloud-based players. I know also Microsoft have like a ChatGPT version that's hosted in Europe called like Azure ChatGPT, I think, or Azure GPT, which I would take a look at. So I think there are some options, and then obviously if you go down the route of like self-hosting, they would be the like let's say the LLMs. Now I don't know if they would necessarily have all of the functionality around documents, so probably what you need to use is another software, if you can find a European one, to actually extract the text from the document and then give it to the large language model as text.
Yes. We had another question from Eric. Actually, it was not a question, it was a tip for everyone, which I think is very valid. And I think it highlights exactly what we were just mentioning. In some cases, using a vision model to parse a PDF document yields better results than like you transform your PDF in an image file and then you give it to a vision model. And that is exactly because in some cases, the PDF is actually not text encoded, it's image encoded. And in that case, it's a bit weird, but yes, the vision model is going to do a better work at processing the information because actually the text model is not able to see what's in the PDF. So I think these limits won't happen in the future with evolution like you see with Claude. And what actually they are doing is this is where the models are not going to be forever fundamental models. They're just basically a combination of the different models. And that's typically what Claude is doing under the hood. They are taking a document, realizing whether there's image or not in there, then just feeding it to their document, which is vision-based, and then just feeding that back to the document and just adding some layer. And obviously doing a bunch of stuff we don't realize, which have an impact on performance and why this happened faster. But these are the things that they are trying to do. And these are also the things that eventually they will be able to do. Do we want to do the last demo, Jan, or do we leave it there?
I think we can. We just quickly you quickly show it up on the screen for anyone who needs to drop. As I said, the recording's going to be out tomorrow. This one is probably just like we maybe did the order a little bit wrong tonight. This is probably the most entry level demo that you can follow along, but I really wanted that everyone can sort of leave with a way of let's say having a more automated flow to this document management. And now we're going to look at a very basic example of some knowledge embedding that you can do in ChatGPT.
Yes.
So, and here with this,
to answer pressing questions.
The chatbot to answer pricing questions, exactly. So what we're going to be doing is live building out a custom GPT. So maybe while I go back and share my screen, if anyone, if you can do some thumbs up or react, has everyone already like played around with custom GPTs? Give a thumbs up if you've already built a custom GPT yourself. I'm seeing some thumbs down. Okay, I'm going to show you exactly how quick and easy this is. So I'm going to go up in my ChatGPT account. Yeah.
Before you go there, just I want to point to the people that they will find us a slide in the slide deck that we'll share afterwards that will also gather and summarize. Okay, what are the differences between file embedding capabilities benchmark between Gemini Gems, Code Project, OpenAI custom GPTs, OpenAI assistants, when to use what. Like we have this in a little table, and that could be a topic that we'll address next time.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do here is in my ChatGPT account and make sure this is, I believe still, I don't know if they've updated it recently, if it was one of the Christmas announcements, but I believe this is still a paid feature, the custom GPTs. So one of the reasons why it is worth it, if I go to the top right here, I can look at my GPTs. And now I'm going to go and create a new one. And what we actually have for anyone that wants to do this is over on our website, we have here in the tutorials, we actually have a bunch of these AI and automation tutorials that you can follow along with. So maybe Piv, you can drop the link to this one just in the chat. And if I find it down here, what I'm going to do is just use this one, create a chatbot to answer basic pricing questions. So this one is going to be our easy way of having the ChatGPT do this knowledge embedding. So I'm actually going to, rather than chatting with this, I'm going to hit configure and I want to get straight to the source. So what I'm going to name this one is pricing GPT. And if I have a look down, I'm going to skip through this because I'm going to grab from my instructions here. So I'm just giving it a description and saying answering is basically this is going to answer pricing related questions for our company's products and services, providing accurate and up-to-date information. And what I can, whoops, I need to go back to that one. I need to give it some instructions. And now what you'll notice down here is knowledge, and I can upload files. So that's what I'm going to do. And what I basically have is like a mock pricing catalog here, which is just a PDF. It's also available in that tutorial, where we basically have just listed for this fake SaaS company some of the different tiers that it has, the different plans, and some information about it. And so I'm going to basically upload this document. ChatGPT is going to embed that and turn it into knowledge, and then we'll be able to ask questions based on this document. So very similar to the example with Dante, but something you can do all without leaving ChatGPT. So I'm going to upload files, and it's going to be the SaaS pricing catalog. And then the last thing I need to do is give it some instructions, and I already have also these prepared. So here's my long prompt. Again, what I would recommend for anyone like getting into prompting, check out the Anthropic prompt generator tool. We can maybe show that in a future session. We also covered it in our beginner prompting workshop that we did a couple of weeks ago. So I'm just going to drop in these instructions. So all I'm telling it is I'm giving it a role, then I'm giving it some instructions. This line here is very important. I can actually make this a little bit bigger, saying only refer to the catalog in your knowledge. And what this will allow it to do is to not hallucinate and try and get some information from elsewhere if it doesn't know the answer. Again, here, it might not be the best prompt, but this is all you need to do to iterate on to improve your results. And that is basically it. I can save this one. Maybe what I can do is just also, so it looks a bit fancy, have DALL-E give it a nice picture. And what I probably want to do is here, even it might seem counterintuitive, but I want to actually deactivate some capabilities because I don't want it to do web search. Canvas might be useful, but in this case, I just want to have a simple chat, and I don't want it to be able to generate images. If someone asks a question about our pricing catalog, I don't want ChatGPT to get creative and draw them a nice picture of maybe their garden. I just want them to answer the question. So here I'm actually taking away some capabilities. So I can just go and hit create.
Maybe, Jan, maybe one tip for people building custom GPTs, you might, if you think that people might ask question of, what happens if I have 100 users, like if it needs to do calculation, what I would recommend when you use ChatGPT is to take the code interpreter and data analysis, because ChatGPT is really bad at doing math, and the only proper way of doing math actually for LLMs is actually for them to run code to run the calculation, which is a bit surprising, but that proves to be significantly yielding better results.
Yeah. Perfect. So I'm just going to hit update this one. And you can see that you can actually share these with others. You can share people in your organization or make it available to anyone. And then once that's done, so I can even say here, anyone with a link, copy the link, and I'll drop it in the chat in case people want to try and test this out. And let me view my GPT. And now this is basically, oops, there we go, I'm signed in. Now I can basically chat with it. So I think we have a demo question prepared here, which is, let me take a look at this one. So we're a growing company and might need to add some users over time. Do you offer any flexible pricing options? So if I edit this one, you see there, it quickly searched the knowledge, and just like that, it was able to now start typing an answer. So there's scalable subscription tiers, it's annual versus monthly billing, starts from starting plan up to 5 users, and it's giving some best options for growth, the pro plan and the scale plan. And so now you see that this is given an answer. All of the information here has been done based on the information in the document, so that it's already nailed. And so now in terms of let's say if you're not happy with some of these results, it's purely around, so if it's not finding the right information, you need to think, okay, I need to maybe update my knowledge base and include more questions that people might have. Or if it's about the format that you have, that's purely something you need to update the instructions. Give it an example. Maybe you don't want answers to be so long. Maybe you want to make it sound more like a human just wrote it quickly. That is purely about going into ChatGPT and playing around with a combination of the instructions and the knowledge that has been embedded. But again, it's just made it so, let's say, beginner friendly. You don't need to be an engineer to set these up. And it was very exciting to see that Tylen in the chat has even already built over 3,000 GPTs. So he can definitely vouch for it being a powerful tool to use. So knowledge embedding, maybe when people was explaining it, it sounded a bit daunting. It sounded a bit like, okay, how can I actually set this up? But here with just custom GPT, like all these tools are really making it super easy for you to have access to this amazing, like let's say modern tech and be able to play around with this. So that's, if I could leave you on that last thing, or maybe I throw it back over to you, is just really experiment with these different methods. And depending on your use case, you'll need to adjust whether you go with file upload or knowledge embedding.
Awesome. We are way past the time limit. Does anybody have a question? We will take time for questions. We'll just stop trying to. We'll stop covering ourselves. Any question? Or are we good? Looks like we're good. All right, then if there's not any question, we will share tomorrow the link. Actually, our wrappers apps that do these sort of things worth exploring. I mean, I think the main question is the use case. If you want to, for example, embed that, you know, as a chatbot in your websites, that's the only reason why I would try to do this, because if you want to build something like this, you could do it. And what Jan has just shown us is only accessible in the UI interface, so in the custom GPT UI. But you can build almost exactly the same using the assistant from for OpenAI, and then the assistant is available per API. But then if you want also to have a chatbot that is available, you know, that you can embed on your website or stuff like this, I would recommend using a SaaS wrapper, because you don't want to have to rebuild a chatbot yourself, and it's going to be difficult to find only a chatbot builder that you can connect to the API of your assistant, your AI assistant that you build on OpenAI. So this is actually the case where I would recommend using a wrapper when you want to embed it, when you want to potentially build a Slack integration, or if you can just use it inside the GPT store or per API, I would recommend using a wrapper for now.
And I think for anyone that might not, like if you're hearing the term wrapper app for the first time, we're not talking about Eminem or 50 Cent or anything like that. Is basically there are apps, and actually Dante, what we showed at the start, is an example of it. Like they haven't created their own AI model, but basically they've built some functionalities around the large language models and just make it incredibly easy for you to use. So Dante I would even classify in as like a wrapper app. Airtable is more like a SaaS that added some AI features. But for instance, like with invoice processing, we at 9X, we use Conto, which is like I would say one of the more digital, like let's say business banks. And in there, we can just drop an invoice, and Conto's done the work for us that it extracts all the information from the invoice. So it really depends. Like the modern SaaS are also adding more and more of these capabilities. So definitely, it's a good call out. You don't need to always like we have one saying here at 9X is, depending on the price, don't build it if you can buy it. And if it's very easy to just have it in whatever SaaS that you're using or a specific wrapper, but just know that when you're buying it, what you might be losing is some customizability.
All right. I think that's it for tonight. Thanks everybody for joining.